Yeah, okay, so we're a medium-sized hospital, and we were in the process several years ago to onboard a new hospital. Basically, it was going to be an entirely new building, and it was going to replace the current hospital. And in that, we wanted to, we had kind of a traditional network, and we wanted to, going into the new hospital, take the opportunity to get better visibility into our network. And actually, with Cynerio, when we first looked at it, it was brought on by our former CISO. At that point, we just wanted to look at the biomed traffic and IoT traffic because we had like zero visibility into it at that point. And and Cynerio offered that, in spades. And then we realized that just given the design of Cynerio, we realized that we could actually use that technology to get visibility into basically all of our traffic. The Cynerio customer success team was very supportive in our efforts because we had some financial constraints going in. We didn't really know the scale that we would be, we could actually leverage Cynerio. And they just kind of stayed with us and kind of helped us along on board the product. And it just sort of blossomed from there. Yeah, so I'd say so after Cynerio had been we fully onboarded, and this was I think before we brought the new hospital on, and we could see malicious activity coming from a legacy system. It was in biomed device, and we saw the same. We could correlate that event with our web filtering solution, Cisco Umbrella. We actually saw command and control events in Umbrella, and then we did it, and also was getting reported in Cynerio. And Cynerio gives a lot. It's something like Umbrella is just going to let you know that there's this single IP that's exhibiting this behavior. But with Cynerio, we were able to see the whole network activity coming in and out of that device, and the threats. And so at that point we knew exactly which system what was the problem and what wasn't potentially infected. Yet at the same time, we weren't able to, and so this is where we kind of went down the road of traditional remediation, and reached out to the system owner, who reached out to the vendor to try to get this. It was attached, costly medical device, and we weren't able to remediate it at that time, and just kind of realized that we can't affect production and patient care by just taking it off the network. At that point, we realized that Cynerio was going to be our tool to tell us what that traffic was, so we could see what was malicious, what was unnecessary, and what was critical for function. Using micro-segmentation was basically our mitigation response. It was really all we had, and we had, since we had that full visibility, we were able to achieve that. So that was huge. And you hear a lot about that. It's like, well, and actually I think that was a selling point of Cynerio early on was, some things, we can identify the vulnerabilities, but, in reality, you can't actually remediate them because they're end of life, or they're just too critical. There's not redundancy. So really your only recourse is that segmentation, which is what Cynerio, does so well. The stage in which we had Cynerio deployed, we were just, in the portal and, saw the event, and also the customer success team, did let us know that, this was happening. Yeah. And then at that point we were able to correlate it with other technologies. Well, as soon as it was detected, we were able to, we understood it pretty quickly. The malware seemed to be activated by something. It just sort of, it was the device had been on the network and in Cynerio and was quiet, and then the malicious activity began. So yeah, but once it was detected, we kind of had the full picture within Cynerio. Yeah, there has actually been recently 2 incidents where it was kind of similar to the early one, where we saw malicious activity coming from an endpoint. In this case, it was a workstation, and we were able to correlate that with our EDR it's just carbon black. And yeah, and Cynerio was able to see it on with the carbon black. We're only seeing the endpoint activity with some outbound inbound connections, but we actually saw some malicious signatures in the packets that Cynerio was able to provide that. So it's actually, we have EDR, and and Cynerio is providing, is complementing that with NDR. So we get a much clearer picture. And so yeah, it was kind of the same. It was a kind of a rinse and repeat. We saw the malware incident. It was a laptop that we could just take off the network, and then by looking at the rest of the network, ensure that that was the only indicator of compromise. Initially, we had, as things were a little more decentralized, and we had the PACS team, the biomed, and they weren't necessarily teams, and they actually weren't, necessarily thinking about security, and that was sort of our job, and kind of, using tools like Cynerio, to get that job done. But in the process, we've been able to, educate people. The Cynerio is really, the portal is really designed for, system ownership and self-management. So that's kind of the goal. That's still a work in progress, is to get all the system owners for the various teams, dialed into Cynerio, because it's not just one person being is handling security. I mean, all of these system owners need to have security, needs to be implicit in how they manage their environments.